What if I told you that life in a luxurious Victorian mansion was a real test of endurance? Behind the majestic dark brick facades and ornate moldings lay a reality that would shock modern people. These houses were built to demonstrate status, but completely disregarded the basic human needs for warmth and dryness. Huge halls with high ceilings turned into icy traps where every step was difficult. We are accustomed to thinking of that era as a time of impeccable comfort, but in reality it was a constant struggle against cold and damp. Watch the video to the end to find out how aristocrats survived in rooms where the temperature rarely rose above 10 degrees Celsius and what the true cost of maintaining these stone giants was. Are you ready to learn the shocking truth about Victorian construction? It is important to understand that Victorian mansions were designed with a single purpose in mind: to impress guests with their size and intricate decor. The architects of the time created huge enfilades of rooms that were virtually impossible to heat with the means available. Stone walls several feet thick accumulated cold and moisture, turning the interior into a damp crypt. Huge single-glazed windows let in icy drafts that roamed freely through the long corridors. The heating system was based on fireplaces, which only heated the space within a 2-meter radius. The rest of the room remained freezing, and frost often appeared on the walls on particularly cold nights. The layout of the house forced residents to travel long distances between the living areas and the kitchen. This meant that any food was already cold by the time it reached the table after being brought up from the basement. Hot water also quickly lost its temperature in jugs while servants carried it to the bedroom. The owners of such houses literally lived in conditions of eternal off-season, unable to warm up. Even in their own beds, they felt the icy breath of stone. The interior decoration, overloaded with heavy fabrics and dark wood, only intensified the feeling of heaviness and cold. These mansions were monuments to pride, but they demanded incredible physical endurance from their inhabitants. Every winter day turned into a complex operation of moving between rare islands of warmth. The cold penetrated even the most expensive carpets and upholstery. Tons of coal were needed every day to maintain even minimal warmth. Servants were forced to constantly carry heavy baskets throughout all floors of the building. Despite all efforts, it was technically impossible to heat such large volumes of air. The high ceilings caused all the heat to rise, leaving the floor icy. Marble staircases and stone floors turned into real skating rinks in winter. Moisture from the air settled on cold surfaces, making them slippery and dangerous. Residents often complained of rheumatism and constant joint pain due to dampness. The architecture served as a symbol of power, but it brought suffering to its owners. Every detail of the decor, from the moldings to the statues, accumulated cold over the centuries. The walls of the houses were so massive that they did not warm up even in the hot summer months. This created an effect of eternal cold that could not be overcome by simple fire. People lived inside giant stone thermoses that worked to cool them down. The doors between rooms were rarely closed tightly, allowing drafts to circulate freely. This led to a constant movement of icy air throughout the living quarters. The curtains on the windows often fluttered from the wind, penetrating through the cracks in the frames. Comfort was sacrificed for the aesthetic grandeur of the facade. Many owners preferred to close most of the house for the winter. They moved into tiny offices where a comfortable temperature could be maintained. Magnificent living rooms stood abandoned and cold until spring. Life in luxury turned out to be a struggle for every degree of warmth. Do you think this architecture can be considered a triumph or a failure of human thought? Share your opinion about Victorian architecture in the comments below this video. Also, be sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any new facts. Your opinion is valuable to the development of our historical community. I will reveal one of the most carefully guarded secrets of the wealthy homes of the past. Reception rooms were almost never used for everyday life. These huge halls with 5-meter ceilings, columns, and massive windows existed more as a status symbol than as living space. They served as a backdrop for rare receptions, balls, and official visits. On ordinary days, the heavy doors to these rooms were locked tight and sometimes even boarded up. This was done for a simple and cruel reason: to keep the precious heat from escaping from the few rooms where people actually lived. The furniture in the staterooms stood under thick dust covers for months, sometimes years. Sofas, armchairs, and tables existed as museum exhibits rather than everyday objects. The fireplaces in these rooms remained cold and dead until the owners gave special orders. They were lit only in exceptional cases. The owners of the houses preferred to huddle in small studies, libraries, or family living rooms, which could be heated relatively quickly with a single fireplace. The huge halls were turned into dark, empty, and echoing repositories of antiques and family heirlooms. Even during holidays and celebrations, the formal rooms remained extremely uncomfortable and drafty. Guests often did not take off their outer clothing, and ladies threw heavy fur stoles over their shoulders. Men stood in gloves, hiding their hands from the cold. A huge number of candles created the illusion of comfort and luxury, but provided almost no heat. Stone or marble floors, even covered with several layers of carpets, remained icy and drew heat from the feet. Servants worked for hours in these halls, preparing them for guests. They scrubbed the floors, arranged the furniture, and lit hundreds of candles while standing in the freezing air. They were not allowed to light additional fires for warmth. Many of them caught colds or fell ill after such preparations. Victorian luxury was just a beautiful facade that hid a lack of basic comfort. Every molding, every gilded frame emphasized not coziness, but the distance between the owner and real life. There was even the concept of seasonal migration within a single building. Families literally moved from one part of the house to another, depending on the time of year. In summer, they occupied cooler rooms, and in winter, they huddled around a few fireplaces. The rooms on the north side of the house were often completely abandoned throughout the long winter. Their walls froze through, and frost could appear on the wallpaper and ceilings inside. This created a strange and disturbing atmosphere in the huge house where dozens of rooms were dead and silent. The owners felt not like owners, but like temporary guests in their own stately apartments. Emptiness, cold, and drafts dictated the daily routine and routes of movement. Life was concentrated around a few warm fireplaces, as if around hearths in a cave. The chandeliers in the staterooms were so massive and hung so high that it took a whole team of servants to light them. Each candle had to be inserted by hand. At the same time, each of them gave only a tiny spot of light in a huge space. The corners of the halls were shrouded in semi-darkness, and the shadows seemed alive and disturbing. At such moments, the reception rooms resembled the settings of Gothic novels about ghosts and cursed families. When it was time for dinner or a reception, guests had to walk through long, cold corridors. This journey lasted only a few minutes, but it was a real ordeal. For ladies in thin dresses, the icy air was particularly painful. The cold instantly penetrated to the bones, causing them to huddle together and quicken their pace. No amount of gold, mirrors, or chandeliers could replace simple human comfort. The grandeur of these rooms was designed to intimidate and inspire respect in everyone who entered. It was a reminder of the power, wealth, and antiquity of the family that owned this stone palace. However, the owners themselves paid for this with constant discomfort, colds, and chronic illnesses. Real life did not take place in the halls, but in the cramped, inconspicuous rooms on the outskirts of the house, where it was warm and truly lived. Would you like to have a house with 50 rooms if you only really use 3 or 4? Write about how you feel about such excessive and uncomfortable luxury of the past. In the next chapter, you will learn how Victorians dealt with dampness inside their walls and why their houses literally breathed moisture. Are you ready to discover new details about life in these icy palaces? You've definitely never heard about this unique secret. One of the most frightening problems in Victorian mansions was constant and severe condensation. Due to the temperature difference between the icy stone and people's warm breath, moisture accumulated. This caused expensive wallpaper to rot and peel off in pieces. The rooms had an indelible smell of mold and stagnant, dirty water. No expensive incense or perfume could mask this aroma. The owners spent fortunes on re-wallpapering every few years. However, it was absolutely impossible to defeat the laws of physics and nature in those conditions. The dampness penetrated not only the walls but also deep into clothing. People lay in beds that felt damp to the touch all night long. This led to constant colds and chronic joint pain among the residents. Wardrobes in bedrooms were always moved away from the walls for ventilation. If this was not done, dresses quickly became covered with a white fungal coating. Heavy curtains on the windows became huge reservoirs of moisture and dust. Cleanliness in the Victorian sense was an endless battle against the decay of materials. Poor ventilation only exacerbated this deplorable state of interiors. To hide the traces of dampness, the walls were often covered with dark wooden panels. Behind them, mold grew even faster and became completely invisible to the eye. The gaps between the stone and the wood were an ideal environment for microorganisms. The residents literally breathed in fungal spores, unaware of the harm they were causing. Luxurious paintings in gilded frames deteriorated very quickly from moisture. The paints faded and the canvases began to crack and sag from dampness. Life in such a mansion resembled staying on a sinking stone ship. Every morning began with an inspection of new stains on the ceilings. Rainwater often seeped through micro cracks in the old stonework. This created entire streaks that ruined expensive moldings and wall paintings. Servants constantly placed buckets in empty rooms during rainstorms. The only way to combat this was to completely renovate the foundation. Moisture even destroyed metal, causing rapid corrosion of door handles and locks. Wooden floor beams rotted and eventually became life-threatening. The house required constant supervision by an army of repairmen and carpenters. Without proper care, the mansion could have fallen into ruin within 10 years. Many Victorians believed that damp air contributed to the development of special qualities of the spirit. In reality, they simply got used to the constant discomfort and smell of the basement. Medicine at that time rarely linked lung disease to the condition of the walls of the home. The truth was hidden behind beautiful facades and expensive silk draperies. Be sure to like this video if you appreciate modern dry and warm homes. It is very important for us to know if you are interested in the topic of everyday difficulties of past eras. Your support helps us create higher quality and more detailed historical videos. Click the thumbs up button right now if you agree with our conclusions. What I am about to show you will truly change your perception of everyday life in that era. In order for a huge house to function, an entire army of domestic servants worked there every day. Without these people, the mansion would have come to a standstill, like a complex mechanism without fuel. Kitchens, laundry rooms, and pantries were almost always located in damp and cold basements. There was no sunlight or fresh air. Maids and servants walked miles every day through dark corridors, passageways, and steep staircases, connecting the underground world to the main floors. The distances inside the house were so great that internal logistics took hours. Delivering food from the kitchen to the dining room required the coordinated work of several people. Most of the working time was spent carrying coal for the fireplaces. It was lifted from the basement in baskets and buckets over and over again. The house turned into a veritable labyrinth, where a cold passageway or narrow staircase lurked around every turn. The servants existed in their own rhythm, completely separated from the measured and warm life of their masters. The stairs for the servants were narrow, steep, and almost always unlit. They had to climb them with heavy trays, pots, and buckets of water. Any mistake could result in injury. The servants' rooms were located under the roof of the building. They were tiny rooms with low ceilings. In winter, it was almost as cold there as it was outside, and in summer, it was unbearably stuffy. There were no fireplaces or stoves in these rooms. Heating was considered an unnecessary luxury for servants. The only way to keep warm was with a rubber hot water bottle placed under the blanket. Sometimes the servants slept in their outer clothing to stay warm. This layout was not accidental, but a conscious social decision. The space of the house clearly reflected the hierarchy of society. The masters were not supposed to see the hard work that ensured their comfort. This strict division created the feeling of two parallel worlds under one roof. In one world, the masters sat in their living rooms, wrapped in blankets, discussing the news and receiving guests. In the other world, people worked themselves to exhaustion in icy basements and dark corridors. Every lit candle, every hot dinner, and every warm fireplace required enormous physical effort from dozens of people. The system of bells, chimes, and intercoms only emphasized the scale of the house. The owners pressed a button, and somewhere deep inside the building, movement began. Life in a mansion was a triumph of social inequality over common sense. The house was a complex machine where people served as living parts. In Victorian England, human labor was extremely cheap, and this was reflected in architecture and everyday life. The servants rose long before dawn in their freezing attic rooms. They had to go down to the basement to light the fires and start preparing breakfast. Moving around the house in complete darkness was dangerous and exhausting. The stone steps were cold and slippery. Every morning began with a physical ordeal. Many servants suffered from chronic lung, joint, and spinal diseases. The dampness and cold undermined their health year after year. The basement rooms were rarely ventilated and always remained damp. Mold on the walls of kitchens and laundry rooms was common. The air was heavy and stuffy. Working in such conditions was reminiscent of labor in mines or underground. The servants were the invisible engines that kept this stone mechanism running smoothly. They cleaned, heated, washed, did laundry, and carried heavy loads from morning until late at night. Their work remained unnoticed as long as everything ran smoothly. Without them, the mansion would very quickly have turned into a cold, dark, and uninhabitable shell. True luxury was always based on the quiet, hard, and exhausting labor of people whom no one wanted to remember. What do you think was the hardest part of life in such a mansion for the servants? In the next chapter, you will learn how the residents coped with the terrible weather in their bedrooms. How exactly did they survive in rooms where the water in the wash basins froze overnight? Stay with us to uncover all the secrets of Victorian life. Bedrooms in large mansions were considered one of the coldest places in the house. Fireplaces were only lit for a short time before bedtime. Huge four-poster beds were not only a luxury, but also a form of protection. Thick curtains created an enclosed space that retained the heat of the human body. Without such a cocoon, it was impossible to sleep in a room at a temperature of 5 degrees. People wore several layers of heavy woolen clothing and caps at night. This saved them from the icy drafts that swept through the huge bedroom all night long. Sleep turned into a real struggle to keep the body warm. Hot water bottles or hot coals were a must-have for every bed. They were placed under the blankets an hour before the owners came into the room. This helped to warm up the icy sheets a little before the residents went to sleep. Bricks heated in the stove and wrapped in thick cloth were often used. In the morning, the water in the wash basins was often covered with a thin crust of transparent ice. Washing became a real feat, requiring tremendous willpower and fortitude. People tried to perform their hygiene procedures as quickly and economically as possible. The cold dictated its harsh rules at the beginning of each new day. Waking up in such a house was the most uncomfortable moment for all the residents. The servants had to go into the bedroom in the dark to light the fire. They tried not to wake their masters, but at the same time to warm up the room. All the interior items burned their hands with their unbearable morning cold. The wooden floors creaked loudly from the sharp temperature changes in the room. This created a frightening atmosphere in the pre-dawn twilight of the huge old house. Victorians believed that cold was good for strengthening a person's moral character. In reality, it simply exhausted their bodies and undermined their health. Many bedrooms had huge windows facing the windy north side of the garden. Thick curtains only partially blocked the icy wind from the street at night. The owners often woke up with their noses completely frozen. Life in the bedroom resembled camping conditions in a winter forest. The blankets were so heavy that it was difficult to even turn over under them. They were made of several layers of thick wool and poultry down. This created a cocoon effect that made it difficult to leave before dawn. Every movement released the accumulated heat into the cold room. Before going to bed, people often drank hot beverages to warm themselves up from the inside. This helped them fall asleep faster, despite the icy air around the bed. Alcohol was also often used as a remedy for the eternal winter cold. However, these measures could never bring true comfort. The walls of bedrooms were often decorated with tapestries for additional insulation. They covered the cold stone and slightly softened the acoustics of the empty space in the house. Nevertheless, dampness penetrated even the densest woven fabrics. The bedroom remained the harshest place in the entire huge Victorian mansion. For a long time, a bathroom in a large mansion was considered a rare and extremely complex technical innovation. Its presence emphasized the status of the owner and was considered a sign of progress. However, in practice, such luxury brought many new problems. Until the mid-19th century, there was simply no such thing as a full-fledged bathroom. Bathing most often took place right in the bedroom, near the fireplace, where there was at least some warmth. When separate rooms began to be allocated for hygiene, this immediately created serious temperature difficulties. Bathrooms were placed as far away from living areas as possible. Most often, they were located near the outer walls or in the corners of the house. These areas were the coldest and most drafty. The washing room turned into an ice chamber, especially in winter. Filling the bathtub was a difficult and tedious process. Servants had to carry dozens of buckets of hot water from the kitchen or basement. It took a lot of time and effort. By the time the bathtub was filled, some of the water had already cooled down. The icy air in the room accelerated this process. Bathing began with water that was already losing its heat. Cast iron bathtubs themselves exacerbated the problem. The cold metal acted as a huge radiator of cold. It instantly took the heat away from the water. Even if the water was poured in almost boiling, after a few minutes it became only warm. At the same time, the room remained just as cold. People had to wash as quickly as possible. Staying in the bathroom for too long could lead to hypothermia. The steam from the hot water rose and immediately condensed. It settled on the walls and ceiling, turning into cold drops. These drops dripped back onto the body and floor. The experience was far from cozy. Fireplaces were rarely installed in such rooms. An open fire near water and steam was considered too dangerous. The risk of fire was very high. Therefore, the bathroom remained without an additional source of heat. Even in the wealthiest homes, comfort in this room was minimal. After finishing the procedure, one had to act very quickly. People hurriedly dried themselves off, put on their clothes, and almost ran to the nearest fireplace. Delay meant cold and illness. Hygiene became a test of endurance. For many, it was a real ritual that required patience. The enormous labor costs of servants made daily bathing practically impossible. Preparation took hours. Therefore, most people limited themselves to partial wiping. This was done in warmer rooms, most often in bedrooms. Full bathing was reserved for rare occasions. Homeowners were proud to have running water. It was considered a symbol of progress and wealth. However, they used it very carefully. In winter, the pipes often froze. The house could be without water for weeks. Repairing such systems was extremely expensive. Walls and floors had to be torn open. This destroyed the finish and required large expenses. Therefore, the owners tried not to overload the system unnecessarily. True comfort remained only a dream even for the inhabitants of luxurious stone houses. The quality of the water also left much to be desired. The water often had a reddish tint due to old rusty pipes. Sometimes it smelled of metal or earth. Soap did not lather well in hard water. Cleanliness was a relative concept. For people in the Victorian era, hygiene was a constant struggle against circumstances. Every procedure required effort and patience. Nothing happened easily or automatically. Even simple hand washing in winter was a challenge. Gradually, gas water heaters began to be installed in bathrooms for quick water heating. This seemed like a huge step forward. The water heated up faster, and it was no longer necessary to carry buckets. But along with convenience came a new danger. Gas appliances were extremely unreliable. Gas leaks were common. There was a risk of explosion or fire. The rooms were poorly ventilated, and combustion products accumulated inside. People were literally risking their lives for hot water. Bathroom floors were usually covered with tiles. They were considered practical and durable, but tiles were even colder than wood. Bare feet instantly went numb when they touched them. This intensified the overall feeling of cold. Servants tried to lay thick rugs. They softened the cold a little, but the rugs quickly got wet and did not dry well. Moisture led to rot and an unpleasant smell. Dampness became a constant companion in the bathroom. The smell of damp stone and fabric was common in such rooms. It was absorbed into the walls and furniture. It was impossible to get rid of it completely. Even wealth could not save you from it. Mirrors in bathrooms fogged up almost instantly. They became useless. Shaving for men became a risky business. Poor visibility often led to cuts. Every element of the morning toilet was associated with minor but annoying difficulties. Nothing worked perfectly. The bathroom remained more a symbol of luxury than a place of real comfort. Are you ready to find out how they lit these dark and cold spaces? In the next chapter, we will explore the secrets of lighting and combating the eternal darkness of corridors. How bright do you think a house was in the era before electricity? Write your opinion, and we will continue our exciting historical research. Lighting in Victorian mansions remained dim and extremely inefficient for a long time. Candles and oil lamps produced a lot of soot but little real light. Dark oak paneling on the walls absorbed almost all the rays, leaving the corners dark. This created the very gloomy atmosphere we call Gothic. Even during the day, the interior of the house was dimly lit due to the very heavy curtains. They were not open completely to preserve the heat inside the living quarters. The advent of gas lighting brought more light, but added new domestic problems. Gas quickly burned up the oxygen in the rooms, making the air heavy and stuffy. Black, greasy soot settled on the ceilings, which the servants had to constantly clean. In addition, the gas emitted extra moisture, which exacerbated the problem of dampness in the house. Mirrors were hung not only for beauty, but also to reflect light. This helped to illuminate the dark and long corridors of the mansion at least a little. Electricity came to mansions much later and was considered a dangerous technical novelty. The first light bulbs were dim and very often burned out at the most inopportune moment. The wiring was laid directly on top of the walls, which greatly spoiled the expensive historical interior. People continued to use candles, fearing short circuits and fires. Huge chandeliers required complex maintenance and regular cleaning of all elements. Cleaning hundreds of crystal pendants took servants entire working days. Light in a Victorian house was an expensive pleasure that emphasized the gloominess of the space. Each lit gas horn cost the owner a lot of money every day. Lamps often exploded or began to smoke heavily when the wick was incorrectly adjusted. The air was filled with the smell of burnt oil or the specific aroma of lighting gas. This did not contribute to a healthy atmosphere in closed rooms with poor ventilation. People got used to living in perpetual twilight, straining their eyes when reading. Workrooms were lit by table lamps with green shades to protect the eyes. These spots of light were the only bright points in the dark and cold halls. The family's evening life took place in the narrow circle of light from one or two lamps. The rest of the house was plunged into impenetrable and cold darkness until morning. For servants, lighting was even more sparse and often reduced to candle stubs. They had to navigate the black staircases by touch or with a small lantern. This led to frequent falls and injuries in the staff's workplaces. Safety in the home was a very relative concept until the advent of stable electricity. Many Victorians feared bright artificial light, considering it harmful to the skin. They preferred the soft flicker of candles, which hid the flaws of faces and interiors. Dim light helped maintain an atmosphere of mystery and a certain solemnity in the house. However, it made life in the huge halls even more uncomfortable. Lighting was directly related to the social status of the owner of a large house. Only the wealthiest could afford to burn hundreds of candles during balls. On ordinary days, saving on light was the rule even in aristocratic families. Darkness was a natural companion to the cold and dampness of a Victorian stone mansion. In a huge mansion, dust was an omnipresent enemy that was impossible to deal with. The abundance of carved furniture and heavy carpets created ideal conditions for the accumulation of dirt. Coal-fired fireplaces constantly emitted fine black soot throughout the house. It settled on all surfaces in a thin, greasy layer every day. Maids began their workday by dusting hundreds of small knickknacks on shelves. Cleaning carpets was an exhausting process that required them to be carried outside by hand. The lack of vacuum cleaners meant that dust was simply moved from place to place with brooms. There was always a fine dust in the air, which was very irritating to the lungs. Heavy velvet curtains were rarely cleaned and became real dust collectors in the rooms. Homeowners often suffered from allergies without understanding the true cause of their coughs. Luxurious carpets hid dirt in their deep, fluffy layers of fabric for years. They became a source of unpleasant odors that were impossible to completely remove. Kitchens were the dirtiest places in the house due to constant cooking over an open fire. Grease and soot mixed with dust to form a film on kitchen utensils. Dishes were washed in cold water, which did not contribute to achieving perfect cleanliness in the rooms. Maintaining such a house required discipline and a huge amount of human labor hours. Even the richest house was often only clean on the surface. Damp rags only smeared dirt across the porous surfaces of old stone and wood. Dust penetrated behind paintings and mirrors, creating entire deposits of debris there. The struggle for cleanliness in a mansion was a Sisyphean task for many generations of servants. Ventilation in the house was so poor that dust was not blown out into the street. It circulated through the rooms along with air currents from fireplaces and drafts. People literally lived in a cloud of soot, lint, and mold spores for years. The health of Victorians was undermined by this invisible but constant attack on their bodies. Books in libraries were covered with a layer of dust that damaged the paper and leather bindings. Servants had to wipe each volume with a special soft cloth once a week. This work required endless patience and care in handling valuable items. Huge collections of antiques turned into veritable warehouses for the accumulation of house dust. Upholstered furniture was so covered in dust that it rose up every time someone sat down. Victorians invented special covers for furniture to protect the fabric in some way. However, this only created additional layers of material for new dirt to accumulate. The concept of sterility, or even simple cleanliness, was an unattainable ideal of that era. White linen and tablecloths instantly turned gray from the soot of coal-burning fireplaces in the house. Laundry became a multi-day process involving harsh chemicals and boiling. Washerwomen worked in clouds of steam, trying to restore items to their original bright appearance. Cleanliness in a mansion cost the service staff incredible physical effort and health. Cleaning the reception rooms after entertaining guests could take several full working weeks. The vast spaces required a methodical and very slow approach to every square meter. Dust was a symbol of decay that every servant fought against until their last breath. This invisible enemy highlighted the futility of human efforts to combat time and entropy. Life in a Victorian mansion was surprisingly quiet and deeply isolated from the outside world. Thick walls and vast internal distances absorbed almost all sound inside the building. Members of the same family could go hours without seeing each other. This created a persistent sense of melancholy, which was often described in the literature of the time. The silence was broken only by the creaking of old floors or the distant ringing of a silver bell. Children lived in their own separate areas, called nurseries, on the upper floors. Their world was completely confined to a few rooms, where conditions were Spartan. Social interaction within the large family was formal and highly regimented. The huge house did not promote emotional closeness, but rather divided people into rooms. Status and roles were emphasized by the spatial distance between family members in the mansion. Walking through the corridors at night was a real test for the nervous system. Bizarre shadows and echoes created an oppressive atmosphere in the empty and dark halls. For the servants, this silence was a sign of high professionalism and strict upbringing. They moved around the house like shadows, trying not to disturb the peace of their masters. Empty rooms where no one had lived for months filled the house with a feeling of complete abandonment. The mansion lived its own life, paying little attention to the wishes of its inhabitants. These were stone cages that demanded constant service due to their enormous size and history. Loneliness was a frequent companion to both the owners and the servants in this labyrinth. The silence emphasized the grandeur, but deprived the house of human warmth and the joy of communication. The Victorian mansion was a monument to order, brought to its logical and cold conclusion. The sound of footsteps on the marble floor echoed for tens of meters around in the emptiness. This made people walk on tiptoe so as not to disturb the solemn silence of the house. Loud laughter or shouting was considered the height of impropriety and bad taste in the family. Every breath seemed superfluous in the majestic and cold atmosphere of the museum. The owners often spent time in complete solitude in their private libraries or studies. They surrounded themselves with books and art objects to escape the emptiness of the rooms. Social ties were maintained only during official visits and scheduled dinners. True intimacy was a rare guest under the arches of these high and cold ceilings. Servants communicated with each other in whispers in their work areas or basement rooms. They were forbidden to speak loudly in the presence of their masters or in the living quarters. This culture of silence made the house resemble a monastery with a strict code of conduct. Silence was a tool for controlling and maintaining the social hierarchy in a large mansion. Many women in such houses suffered from boredom and a feeling of deep isolation. Their lives were confined to the walls of the house and rare trips to church or guests. The vast spaces of the mansion weighed on the psyche, causing apathy and constant sadness. The house turned into a gilded cage where every day was like the one before. The silence of the empty halls was a reminder of death and the finiteness of human existence in history. The stone giant outlived its owners, remaining as cold and silent as it had been for centuries. People were only temporary guests in this labyrinth of brick, plaster, and wood. Isolation was the price they paid for their exceptional position in society. By the beginning of the 20th century, it became clear that maintaining such mansions was becoming a burden. Property taxes were rising rapidly, and the number of cheap servants was rapidly declining across the country. Without a large staff, Victorian homes quickly fell into complete disrepair and ruin. The walls began to rot from dampness without constant ventilation and high-quality fireplaces. Many aristocratic families were forced to close entire floors of their ancestral estates. They moved to more compact city apartments, where it was much warmer and drier. New technologies required a complete overhaul of old buildings, which cost incredible amounts of money. Installing central heating and stone walls was a technical and engineering nightmare. Most mansions proved completely unsuitable for modern life without radical changes. Luxury, which had previously been the envy of others, became a heavy burden for the owners. Many houses were demolished or converted into apartments and public health facilities. These aesthetics of grandeur lost the battle for economic efficiency and personal comfort. Today, we view these houses as architectural monuments of the past century. We often forget the price of living in these cold halls. It was an era where external beauty was valued far above simple physical comfort. Behind the beautiful facades lay cold, mold, and endless, exhausting human labor. We admire their grandeur, but we would hardly want to return there permanently. These walls preserve the memory of a time when warmth was a supreme and rare luxury. The history of mansions is a story of changes in our ideas about what a real home should be. The stone giants are a thing of the past, giving way to the functionality and simplicity of modern buildings. Many abandoned mansions have fallen into ruin, overgrown with ivy and trees on the outskirts of cities. They have become a refuge for birds and legends about the ghosts of former owners and servants. Nature is slowly reclaiming what humans built with such pride and pomp. These ruins remind us of the vanity and fragility of human ambitions throughout history. Some of the houses now house museums, offering a glimpse into the harsh realities of that era. Tourists walk through the cold halls, marveling at the height of the ceilings and the intricacy of the antique wall decorations. However, they only spend an hour there before returning to their warm and bright hotels. The true coldness of a Victorian house cannot be conveyed through a museum exhibition or photographs. Contemporary architects study the mistakes of the past to create healthier and more comfortable spaces. We have learned to appreciate light, warmth, and fresh air inside our living spaces. The experience of the inhabitants of Victorian mansions became a valuable lesson for the subsequent development of urban planning worldwide. We have moved away from stone labyrinths to the open and functional layouts of modern private homes. The end of the era of giants marked the beginning of a new era, where people became more important than buildings. the house ceased to be a fortress and a symbol of power, becoming a place for real rest in life. We no longer serve walls, but make them serve our daily needs and desires. This is a great progress, for which we had to pay with the loss of an entire architectural culture. Victorian mansions remain in our memory as beautiful but endlessly cold and alien places. They remind us that true luxury is not gold and marble, but warmth. The warmth of human communication, dry walls and light in the windows of every modern home. The history of these houses is over, but their cold walls still continue to tell their secrets. We have completed our detailed immersion into the world of the hidden and harsh engineering of Victorian mansions. These huge buildings are not just pieces of stone and wood, but evidence of human resilience. What surprised you most about the lives of the Victorian elite and their servants? Suggest topics for future videos that you would like to see on the channel in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss new episodes about the hidden and dark sides of history. Your interest helps us explore the most unusual pages of humanity's past,